MPs have just thrown out Boris Johnson's latest attempt to force a general election on the 12th of December. But tomorrow he might adopt a Liberal Democrat proposal for an even earlier general election, as long as the government's withdrawal bill is delayed too. The European Union today confirmed their offer of yet another delay to Brexit, this time until the end of January. What exactly was Labour trying to do today? I mean, Andrew Mitchell's regarding this basically as a win for Boris Johnson.
Well, he may interpret it that way, but what we were keen to shine a light on was that we cannot trust Boris Johnson, and we've said consistently that we want that guarantee of no deal off the table.
Tomorrow Parliament will be asked to vote on the government bid, but under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act that requires a 2/3 majority. The Lib Dem SNP option, an amendment to the Act, would not allow a general election unless Brexit was delayed until at least January the 31st, and it would only require a simple majority to pass. They have now written to the EU to ask for that extension.
If the Prime Minister genuinely wants an election before Christmas, then he'll support this bill. If actually what he wants to do is pretend he wants an election before Christmas and then change the date so that we crash out without a deal, then he needs to come clean on that.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition, literally and figuratively, has run away from the judgment of the people for the third time, Mr. Speaker. He's turned down our offer to get Brexit done, in spite of the fact that he and every member of his party stood on a promise to deliver Brexit in this Parliament. And I think, frankly, that the electorate will find his behaviour utterly bewildering. But as I said when moving the motion, we will not allow this paralysis to continue. And one way or another, we must proceed straight to an election. So later on this evening, the government will give notice of presentation for a short bill for an election on the 12th of December so that we can finally get Brexit done. And there is no support in the House, as we've heard earlier on from the benches opposite, for the WAB to proceed. But, Mr. Speaker, this House cannot any longer keep this country hostage. Millions of families and businesses cannot plan for the future, and I don't believe that this paralysis and this stagnation should be allowed to continue. Now that no deal is off the table, have a great new deal.
So Boris Johnson will introduce an almost identical bill to the December 9th general election proposal that was put forward by the Liberal Democrats and the SNP. If his bid for a poll fails this evening, it's been reported. Yes, these reports that came out before the proceedings of the evening took place. Off to a great start, it would appear. You know, why would anybody feel the need to vote for the proposals on offer this evening when it was common knowledge that in the event of said vote failing to obtain a majority, the PM was going to bring about an identical bill, or almost identical, to the one that the SNP and Lib Dems had brought about or suggested they were going to bring about the day prior. This proposal of theirs, of course, which by some sheer organic coincidence was announced a day earlier, touting an election on their terms with the self-awareness exempt as per usual, as they wheeled out the mundane excuse of the "we don't trust Boris" routine for the 240th time this month alone. An excuse as shite as their claim for why they don't trust him, which is the same as their excuse for rolling out their Ben bill. The same big brain plot foilers seemingly have the inside scoop on the PM's covert plans to enact Operation Delta No Deal. Even though they've already prevented this, I would have thought, with their Ben bill bullshit, but not according to the intel obtained by these wankers. So their solution to prevent the far-right Brexit extremists is an amendment to remove no deal from the equation completely once and for all. How convenient. So unheard of. A total game changer. Didn't see that one coming. So other conditions as well as that included the PM would have to sideline his shitey Theresa 2.0 until after the election, as well as an extension request being sent, with said request being accepted, and surprise, surprise, a 3-month extension was announced today, or yesterday now. and it appears it was right on time. So with their own election proposals being announced and the subsequent trust issues due to the totally legitimate intel of covert no-deal plotting, it went without saying that nobody was going to vote for the proposals on offer this evening. And as if by sheer fucking coincidence, quite a lot of these coincidences seem to occur these days, they don't need to bother trying to table their version, because the Prime Minister will put forth an almost identical one on their behalf, in the wake of his proposals failing. And then there's Labour, and their convenient absence, which, as far as I'm concerned, was done to ensure definitively that there was definitely not enough votes obtained this evening, to which the dog and pony show would then present us all with the PM pretending that he's been forced into doing something that he doesn't want to do, that of course being the almost identical bill to the SNP, etc., which, bear in mind, he announced prior to the evening's procedures. He made clear just what almost identical will incorporate, but I highly doubt it will get through unless no deal is removed, which is kind of the whole point of this charade that we've been witnessing this evening.
Where do we stand?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, things are genuinely changing on a half-hourly basis. We know that the extension has been granted, so that is good news as far as that goes. We know that the vote tonight on the Fixed Term Parliaments Act did not go Boris Johnson's way, so he's not getting an election on those terms. We're not quite sure what's going to happen tomorrow. It seems like the Prime Minister is going to put forward a bill for a vote on the 12th of December, but we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens with that.
Well, something may happen before then, because what one wonders is, given that you have a motion tomorrow as well, are you minded to talk to the government?
So we're keen for there to be a general election before the 12th, so the 9th is the date that we put forward. And the reason for the difference in that is because we don't want the withdrawal bill to go through.
But the substantive issue is there a way in which you could talk to the government and get some commitments even before the vote?
Do you know what? I don't trust Boris Johnson, and whatever Boris Johnson says in regards to this, I'm not convinced that I trust him to follow through on any promises that he's likely to make on this. And you can understand why. He's tried every single trick in the book.
You can understand why, is the claim made by Kirsty Blackman. Now really, I can't understand why, because ever since Boris Johnson has been elected, and before Boris Johnson was ever elected, when it was Theresa May, in fact, it doesn't matter who or what is the issue of the day, there's always some excuse conjured up by these people as to why they refuse to cooperate or for why they don't trust said individual in question. There's always some excuse spouted off by these people. So no, I can't really understand why, because it's starting to become little more than mundane excuses to pacify your followers.
Christmas, stroke winter, stroke cold, stroke dark vote. A democratic moment in our history.
There are definite problems with having a vote in the winter. Absolutely,
especially in Scotland.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's particularly dark through the day most of the time. But actually, I think this Parliament is so stuck, and it's so important for everybody's futures that we do everything that we can to avoid Brexit. That
then back their bill.
But the issue
that way you get it through.
The issue with it is. This bill, the Brexit bill, the withdrawal agreement bill.
That is the point of this whole saga, and has been since Theresa May first brought her version of this shitey deal back to the Parliament the first time round last year. It's such a bad deal, such a bad withdrawal agreement, that it justifies the people that have every intention, and always have done, of stopping Brexit completely and voting against it. These people would have voted against any decent deal. They probably would have voted against a free trade agreement. But the fact of the matter is, they are justified in voting against any proposals that are put forth when they're all as terrible as the ones on display currently and previously.
The issue with it is, this bill, the Brexit bill, the withdrawal agreement bill, has to go through both houses of Parliament. Now, if we had the general election on Boris Johnson's term, we might end up with that bill going through both houses of Parliament. We know that the Labour Party have voted for it as second reading. We know that they may vote for it later on in the stages, and I don't want to see Brexit on Boris Johnson's terms or anybody else's terms going through, and that's why we're doing everything we can to oppose that.
How about a deal? You support their bill tomorrow, as long as they scrap the withdrawal bill.
we're going to look at the bill that comes forward, we're going to look at it on its merits. We will look at that, we will look at the possibility of amending it, for example. We will look at every possible way to ensure that Boris Johnson does not get his way and does not force his Brexit through in advance.
Rather manipulative mindset hidden behind that short haircut, is there not? Dig beneath the political mumbo-jumbo that make up her vocabulary and think about what she's saying. Boris Johnson, bearing in mind, I believe, is just as guilty as the rest of them. I don't believe he has any intention of getting us out of the European Union, but the media are trying to portray it as if he is having his hands tied and has been forced into all these subsequent positions, when all he wants to do, apparently and supposedly, is enact the will of the people. So when they talk about Boris Johnson getting his way, what they're really meaning is Boris Johnson. But of course they can disguise it as Brextremist talk or far-right no-deal plots. If it's not Tory ideology, it's Boris Johnson.
People can trust that the SNP will continue to be sensible, will continue to be the clear heads that we've been throughout this, actually, at every step of the way, and we will make that same decision tomorrow in terms of trying to stop Brexit, trying to stop Scotland being dragged out of the EU against our will.
And here we go again, scapegoating Scotland to justify their anti-democratic bullshit. Scotland overwhelmingly voted to remain, Scotland being dragged out against our will, yada yada. Bearing in mind, of course, the reasons as to how 62% supposedly voted to remain in the European Union to begin with. Rather different story to the one that the SNP paints. And let's not forget the rhetoric that they are espousing today currently was the exact same rhetoric that's seen them lose a third of their seats last time there was an election. So I'm not entirely sure just why they are so confident that they are not going to be faced with similar circumstances, albeit there was a serious lack of opposition in Scotland, it seems.
That counts, doesn't it? I mean, that counts essentially. No.
If it's a one-line bill, for example, it would be a majority. It wouldn't be under the Fixed Terms Parliaments Act, so you wouldn't need that two-thirds that you need for the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. So we'll see how things go tomorrow. We'll see what happens in relation to that. But I don't want...
Are you talking to Labour?
We're certainly reaching out to Labour. We're making very clear that they cannot support Brexit. They cannot do that to our constituents or to their constituents. See how things go tomorrow. We'll see what happens in relation to that. But I don't want...
Are you talking to Labour?
We're certainly reaching out to Labour. We're making very clear that they cannot support Brexit. They cannot do that to our constituents or to their constituents. And I'm still concerned that they may do that. So, the ball is in their court in a lot of ways on this. We need them to step up to the plate and say that they won't be the midwives of Boris Johnson's Brexit.
His independence for Scotland. And really, in the end, this mess is only part of a stepping stone to that ambition, isn't it?
Do you know what? I want to see independence for Scotland. I have fought my entire life for independence for Scotland. But I don't want to see the UK leave the EU and sink as a result. I mean, we're doing everything that we can to oppose that, and we will keep doing that, because whatever happens, Scotland chooses our own future, chooses to remain in the EU, England will still and will always be our closest neighbour, and I don't want to see them economically, socially or culturally damaged by Brexit.
I mean, the SNP are no different to the rest of the parties down in Westminster when it comes to the treachery on display here, disguised as simply trying to stop no deal from occurring. But there's an extra element of deception, as far as I'm concerned, which pisses me off to high heaven. And that's the fact that the only reason that Scotland's vote went the way that it did was because of Helmut Head's deliberate interference to sway the vote a specific way. And ever since then, she has used the result of her political interference in said referendum result to push and push and push to stop this whole process. And as far as the whole UK is concerned, the SNP seem to be getting all the limelight, using Scotland as their excuse in the process. So they're scapegoating this country and trying to stop Brexit completely, but then claim, simultaneously I should say, that they're going to have a referendum to boot. A referendum that they don't have a mandate for, because the things they are doing currently, today, the likelihood of their criteria being met for their mandate Where they a referendum for is beyond me, but regardless of that fact, the narrative on display here is the SNP are trying to stop Brexit for the whole of the UK, using Scotland as the scapegoat, and then they intend to fuck off with their own little referendum and break up the union after they've screwed over England. It's a dangerous game they're playing, and any fool that unironically supports these twats at this point really needs to do research into what they intend to do to this country if they ever get their so-called independence. Peace.